action, and I've had the great opportunity to interact with NonViolence International for, at least 15 years or more. I think I'm motivated by a couple of reasons. One has to do with the upbringing that I had from my parents, and what they went through as children and what their families went through, and then their sensitivity to injustice, and then living experiences that I had in life made me realize that many people in the world, including, everywhere in every country, can experience injustice, and the sense that I wanted to see if I could find a way to play a role in tackling some of these problems that so many of us face. And even if I cannot solve those problems or wave a magic wand and make them go away, at least in some small way I can make a very small contribution towards realizing change in the medium term or long run. Nonviolent action is one of the greatest forces of good that we have in the world. It can be used for bad purposes, but it is the greatest source of power for good in the world. And it's a source of power that every person has when they act collectively with others. And so it's really important, because when we think about power, we think about the power that authorities may have, that elites may have, that officials in government have, or people in high positions may have. And we don't necessarily think about other sources of power in our societies. And people, regular people, like the ones that we see around us, including ourselves, we also have power when we act together and we use nonviolent methods to identify problems, to identify objectives to address those problems, to make demands, and to, on the one hand, disrupt an unjust status quo, and on the other hand, to engage with those who may have official power in order to synergize these two approaches, which one can call nonviolent action on the one hand and peace building on the other hand. What initially sparked my interest was participating in a session at a human rights conference in Turkey in 2004. And one of our fellow panelists was a lawyer from Turkey who talked about a nonviolent campaign in which it was estimated that 20 million citizens in Turkey participated over the course of 6 weeks to tackle the connections between crime syndicates and the government, and corruption and impunity. And I could not believe my ears, because here I was working in the field of nonviolent action and I had never heard about this. And as fate or the universe would have had it, I was able to learn more and more about how citizens mobilized to tackle corruption. Not because anybody told them that they should, not because they thought, oh, wouldn't that be a nice idea, but because corruption was harming them. It was harming their lives, it was harming their communities, it was harming their countries. And they, of their own volition, realized that in order to tackle those problems of corruption and the related ills that go along with corruption, they needed to develop some sort of nonviolent campaign or movement, either at the national level or at the very local level, to address corruption-related problems. NonViolence International is a gem, and it's a rare gem. And it's really been a wonderful opportunity to get to know Michael Lear, Mubarak Awad, and others who have been on the team over the years. NonViolence International works hard, it's modest, and it is not concerned about garnering kudos and applause. What it wants to do is work together with others so that they may empower themselves to address the problems and injustices they face. And for that, I respect them. Wow, that's a big question. There could be no nonviolent action without women. Women have been leaders of nonviolent movements, either on the front lines or behind the scenes. Women have been strategists. Women have been the ones that have been out engaging in a variety of nonviolent actions. Women engage in nonviolent action to end violent conflict, like civil wars. They engage in nonviolent conflict and nonviolent action in order to push warring parties to make peace. They are engaged in it to rebuild societies and integrate those that come back from violent conflicts into society. They're engaged in struggles for democracy. They have led anti-corruption struggles. Of course, they have led movements for women's equality. They are in the vanguard for protecting children and children's rights. They are in the vanguard for injustices having to do with land rights, protecting our environment, climate change. Our newest nonviolent heroine is Greta Thunberg from Sweden, whom I would like to mention because people may not know it, is autistic, and she is an amazing example of people who are neurologically different from the norm and yet incredibly capable and leaders in their own right and people who can make change. I am a nonviolent actor. And by that I mean that I am grateful that it's possible through my work to share knowledge about the concepts, the strategies, the tactics, and the capacities, the history, and the future of nonviolent action. And I do this because injustice makes me angry, but anger is not a constructive emotion unless we channel it. And we need to channel anger, and we need to channel disappointment into something constructive and positive. And that vehicle is nonviolent action. And when we channel those negative emotions and feelings into something constructive, we turn them into something powerful and a force for good for society, not just for ourselves. This is Shaazka Beyerle, here to talk about nonviolent action and NonViolence International. Thanks for not falling asleep. And if you'd allow me, I'd like to make a plug for two really great tools, of which there are so many in the world, but one is something very new called SNAP. Remember, Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding by nvi-ny and Lisa Shirk, that was just published by the United States Institute of Peace. Look for it online at usip.org. And if you're curious about how citizens mobilize together to impact corruption, you can check out my book, which is available online at nonviolent-conflict.org or curtailingcorruption.org.